So hi everybody, welcome to the first Youth Pledge for Employers virtual career fair, and we're absolutely delighted to have Eddie Gell here, and they're going to be talking about volunteering for employment and their organisation Equal Lives. So Eddie, can I hand over to you?
Yes, so as Ruth said, I'm Eddie, I'm from Equal Lives, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of volunteering for employment. So I'll tell you a bit about myself, how I got into my many jobs, including this one, and how you can use volunteering to upskill yourself, essentially. So, I've double skipped. That's all right. There we go. So who am I? So my name's Eddie and my pronouns are they, them. And I currently work for a charity called Equal Lives. So I have two roles at Equal Lives. One is as a volunteer recruitment officer, which means that I am involved in recruiting different volunteers. So I make the job descriptions, sort of identify where we need extra support and what volunteers can do. I'm then involved in interviewing them. And I can tell you now that interviewing is really scary, even if you're the one doing the interview and not the one being interviewed. So if you're ever nervous in an interview, your interviewer is probably more nervous than you. And I also do sort of general induction training. My undergraduate degree is in education. So I've worked in a school before. I taught sex education for 5 years. And I also worked as part of the National Mentoring Scheme, trying to get people back into education after the pandemic. And there was a lot of catching up to do, as I'm sure you guys would have felt the effects of that. And I also sort of do volunteer support roles. So looking after volunteers, making sure they feel happy, making sure they feel included, and making sure that as an organisation, we're ticking the boxes that people want to tick when they're volunteering, and the volunteers are ticking our boxes for where we need the support. I've had 12 jobs within the last 8 years. I originally started as a leaflet distributor at Subway, which means I stood on the high street in Poole in the cold, handing out leaflets for everyone. And I've now worked my way up to my current position in recruitment. So who would have seen that coming? And I've been volunteering for over 10 years across 3 different organisations. So I initially started volunteering at the age of 14 with Girl Guiding. I was helping out at my local Brownie unit, being a young leader, which just involved running a lot of games and cleaning up. And I really enjoyed that. And I've maintained that role over time. I've been with a couple of different Brownie units, and I'm now volunteering with the Ranger unit, doing sort of unit helper stuff. I volunteered for Sexpression for 5 years. 5 of those, I was a sex education facilitator, teaching sex education in schools. I spent a year as the president of the UEA branch of Sexpression, and I spent 2 years on the national committee as training director. And I've also volunteered with Equal Lives on the Sex and Disability Project. So who are Equal Lives? We are a disabled people's organisation, or DPO. We're also a user-led organisation, ULO, and a disability rights group. So what that means is that we have been created by disabled people to support disabled people. Everyone on our board of trustees who oversee the whole charity, they are all disabled, and we have many disabled volunteers and members of staff. So anyone who identifies as disabled can come to us and receive help, receive support, volunteering, work experience, all those sorts of things we're able to offer. And it can be easier for a disabled person to volunteer for an organisation who knows about disability, who knows about disabling barriers, as we're aware that you might need accommodations, and we know how to make those accommodations, and we've got plenty of things in place. We support individuals to live independent lives. We work with the social model of disability, which means that we believe that society is the one that disables people, and the person themselves is not, it's not their impairment, it's society. For example, if you go to a library, you might see like these very old traditional libraries, a set of stairs, someone with mobility issues, someone in a wheelchair can't get up the stairs. That's not their fault. That's society's fault, the library's fault for not making an accessible ramp. We also have services such as information and advice. So people can phone us up to be like, okay, where can I get this? Where can I find this information? And we can help them, and we can help them with anything that they might need help with, really. We do advocacy services, so stuff like NHS complaints, deprivation of liberties, all very complicated things, worth a Google. I don't know the two halves of it, really. Shop Mobility, which is our centre that we have in Chantry Place Shopping Centre, where people can come and rent mobility equipment. We run payroll services for people who employ their own personal assistants. And we also have membership and campaigning. So anyone can be a member and you can get involved in various campaigns, various membership opportunities. Sometimes you get to have a coffee with a really nice woman called Lisa. So I would recommend that. And we currently employ 43 staff and 22 volunteers. So that's a huge volunteer workforce. So what do we look for in our employees? So we like our employees to have some knowledge of the social model of disability. This is something that is written on our website, and something that I'd really recommend before you do a job application, before you do an interview, just read the website. Even if you just read the first page of the website and sort of take a couple of key points, then you're showing the employer that you're engaged, that you are actually interested, and you've not just sent off some random application. We don't expect you to be an expert, but we do expect you to have at least read that and at least heard of it. Lived experience with disability is desirable for us. Obviously, we won't turn anyone away if you're not disabled, but some of the experiences you have if you are disabled really do go into your role. And you can understand a bit more about what people are talking about, and you can identify these issues that someone without a disability might not be able to see. Any relevant experience, either professional or voluntary, they're both equally as good to us. So that can be for stuff like our payroll positions. We would be looking for someone who's got some experience in finance or some experience running payrolls previously. Obviously, if you don't have any experience, that's fine. We are willing to train and give you that experience so that you can then learn that and move on into paid work or other voluntary work in the future. A good first impression is always super important. If I'm in an interview and the person's maybe not giving me very detailed answers, they're not giving me things back, they might be being a bit standoffish. Some of it you can rule back to nerves and being like, okay, maybe this is their first interview, they're not sure. But I do like them to at least seem a bit engaged and a bit knowledgeable with what we're talking about, and like they are really keen to volunteer with us. Someone who's motivated. Obviously, if you've turned up to an interview, you've given a really good application, we know you're motivated to get this role. Someone who can work in a team. We are a massive team. Volunteers and staff members all need to work together. If we didn't, we wouldn't get very far. Communication skills are important, both written skills when you're doing your application form, but also in your interview. Can you get your point across clearly? When I am being interviewed, I like to start with my point, and then I'll give a bit of evidence. I'll tell them a bit about what I've learned, and then I'll normally finalise with what my main point was and how that's relevant to the question they've just asked me. It's a little bit like writing an essay, except you have to say it out loud. Because I normally find that, at least when I'm being interviewed, I go on for some really long waffly paragraph, and then I've forgotten what the point of what I was saying was at the end. So if I can show that to the interviewer, I can show it to myself as well. And we also want honesty and reliability. We need to regulate ourselves. We need people to be honest with what they're doing. If you're making a mistake, if you've said something wrong, we need that flagged up. And if you say you're going to do something, then we need you to do it. And how can volunteering help? So I am only in the position I have now because of my volunteering experience. During the pandemic, I ran a food bank, and I was able to start from a team of just me and another guy. We recruited over 70 volunteers and we delivered over 1,400 food parcels. And I was the head of volunteering and volunteer support. And that is the only reason I applied for this job and then eventually got this job. So volunteering, it helps you gain relevant experience. I think especially when you're young and you're going for your first job or your first sort of big boy job, as I call them, if you've got any relevant volunteering experience, that's better than no experience at all or just academic. It helps you to develop your skills, ones you already have, ones you might not have, and it helps you understand business practices. I didn't know what GDPR was when I was in school. I didn't know what a policy or a procedure was. So thankfully, now I do know, and you can learn all that through volunteering. You can work independently or in a team. We do a bit of both here at Equal Lives, depending on your role. You can identify your professional interests and talents. Never thought I'd go into recruitment. This time last year, I said I'll never go into HR. I hate HR. It's awful and a waste of time. And now I work in HR. So you never really know what's going to happen. And it gives you a chance to expand your CV as well. Because if you just have your education and qualifications, it does look a little bit half a page, and we want to be making it out to that full page. So that's how volunteering can help you. That's been me, Eddie from Equal Lives. So does anyone have any questions?
Eddie, that was absolutely fantastic and so interesting to hear about your journey into your job, and what a massive impact all that volunteering has made. Like, what a rich background you've developed for yourself there. That was so fascinating. And I also really liked um, really the clear guidance that you gave around application and also about interview, almost like, what a lot of our audience might be familiar with, that almost like peel paragraph, that point evidence explain link. Really fantastic as a way to be able to develop those, your skills in interview. For you, what do you think is kind of next for you? It's so interesting, like hearing about how you've got there, thinking about sort of people having like these sort of 5-decade-long careers potentially. I can't imagine you've achieved so much in such a short space of time. What sort of options kind of are available to you next in terms of what you've done, and what other sort of options are available in the sector?
Yeah, so I'm going back to uni in January. I'm going to finish my master's in business management. So then I can go and look, I don't know, I might do charity management, I might do corporate management. It sort of gives me a different, or you can go into like education management, because education is now a business, it turns out. But within the charity sector, I'm hoping to sort of stay within volunteering, sort of charities and social enterprises.
Yeah.
There's loads in Norwich. Norwich has recently become like a social enterprise city. So I'm hoping that I can either stay at Equal Lives and sort of work my way up the ladder, because I've developed like such a good rapport here, because I've just been willing to do lots of different things, and I'm also quite good at what I do already. So I'm hoping I can stay here, do some things. But I've sort of, what the pandemic has taught me is that you can't really plan anything. You just have to sort of see what opportunities come to you and then just apply for them and see what happens.
And it's really interesting, that sort of flexibility that you've mentioned almost, really, isn't it? And that ability to be responsive to circumstance seems to be something that's sort of really coming out of today in response to the pandemic. Um, is there anything else? Do you feel that the pandemic has sort of altered your workplace in any other ways that we haven't talked about? And what sort of skills and behaviours might young people need to thrive in that environment now?
Yeah, you weirdly have to be very self-managed. Like, this is my lounge, and if I wanted, I could just sit here all day and just watch the TV. There's no one's stopping me. But if you're in an office, everyone can see you. So you have to be really able to set up a work from home space and say, okay, when I'm in this space, I work. When I'm on my lunch break, for example, I'll leave my desk and go somewhere else so that it's an actual break. And I think that self-regulation is really, really hard. Even if you're going into university or further education, you'll find the same thing, is that they make you do loads of work by yourself, which when you're in school, even sitting on your own in the library, someone's watching you. They don't at home.
Yeah, that's such a good point about that sort of self-management piece. And for you, what I think would be really interesting to hear, would you sort of talk us through like a typical day in the life of Eddie? Like, what does your working day look like? You sort of get up, what sort of things happen, and so people can get a picture of what happens in your job.
Yeah, so the first thing I do when I come in is I'll check Microsoft Teams and I'll check my emails to see, like, I might get a chat message on Teams with something that someone wants me to do very quickly, or a question. and I'll gradually work through my emails. So I'll have inquiries from external organisations, I'll have inquiries directly from volunteers that I need to respond to. And also any new volunteers, I have to work on creating sort of files and folders for them, getting them ready for interviews. So liaising with the other managers, booking them in, coming up with the questions, those sorts of things. Team meetings are a fun one. We love a good meeting, especially now people are working online. So they just break up the day, and I like to plan my day around the rest of the meetings. I might have interviews to do. I've got an interview going on this afternoon, which is really exciting. And then I've got to plan induction trainings. They normally happen about once a month. I might have check-in meetings with volunteers. It varies very much day to day. So like, for example, tomorrow, I've got 5 hours worth of meetings, and yesterday I had like a quiz, and that was it. So you really have to work out your time, because meetings can just come in last minute, emails can come in last minute, and you have to also judge, is this urgent? Do I need to do this right now today? Or is there a time where I can fit it in later in the week or even next week?
So that sort of prioritising skill
Yeah,
seems
that's
very
a tricky
important.
one. That's took me a while to
Yeah,
get my head around.
I think that definitely takes people time to learn. But I'm also interested for anybody watching who perhaps is in a situation where they face sort of disabling barriers, especially in terms of sort of getting into employment. What sort of advice would you be giving them? Is there anything in particular you feel that they should hear?
So definitely start with volunteering. Like, if you can identify, you might not be able to identify, but if you can identify sort of a career you're interested in or an area, try and reach out to those organisations or any organisations within that thing. See if they've got any volunteering, see if they've got any work experience. I think it can be quite overwhelming to go in day one, full-time job, and you've got no idea what to expect, no idea what to do. So maybe whilst you're in education, start with doing a half day a week or a day a week, if your education's flexible around that, and see where you can fit in, getting familiarising yourself with the type of work, the workplace, and from the get-go mention that you are disabled and that you would need some accommodations and what those accommodations would be, particularly in terms of applications and interviews. If the employer is not accommodating, and they might not be, they are probably not worth working for. So that's a good way to pre-screen what employers you're going to apply for before you get there. But work up to it really gradually. Be really open and honest from day one, because otherwise, I've had it before where I've gotten into work and they're like, can you read this piece of paper? And I'm like, oh no, I should have told you not to print it on white.
Oh, that's really helpful. I I also was sort of wondering, in terms of thinking about young people interested in working in the charitable or the voluntary sector, what sort of entry level positions are available for people? Just sort of generally, really, Eddie.
Yeah, I would say, trying to think of what's going on in the sector, and it's a
Is it
manic
very varied?
time. Yeah, like you can go in on admin, you can go in and work on the phones, you can sort of do things, not right now, but you could previously do things where you'd work face to face, sort of befriending services, but a lot of those are over on the telephone. But I would say go guiding and scouting are always a good one. Go be a unit helper, work with some children.
Yeah.
They are very inclusive as well. And if you do go off to university, see if they've got a Sexpression branch or another sort of volunteering branch there, and just see really what organisations are in your area. Obviously, we've got Equalise here in Norfolk and Suffolk, but there's loads and loads of other organisations. Voluntary Norfolk put up a load of roles as well. We're looking for there's loads of roles out there, loads of charity shops. It's just depends on what your interest is, where you want to get in, and also you don't necessarily have to take such a straight route. You can tend to just weave around, try loads of different things. go volunteer at a vaccine centre. They seem to need loads of people at the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Eddie, that is brilliant. And that's so interesting to hear as well about sort of your reflections on the region kind of being like a social enterprise zone almost at the moment in terms of supporting each other. That's been absolutely brilliant to talk to you. And just literally, we should let you go. But I was just going to say, I'm just sort of asking everybody, I'm really interested if you could go back and speak to your younger self about careers and about your journey, what advice would you give yourself?
Don't shut any avenues down. I think when I was younger, I was going to be a script writer or a film producer and work in television. And I was very tunnel set on that. But I
Yeah.
think it would have been better for me to do some research into what that entails and how difficult it is to get into that industry and the fact that the days were really long. So I think work out personally what you actually want and don't pick a job title because it seems fancy and fun. Look at everything. Don't shut anything off. Take as many sort of experience. I mean, I took all the experiences offered to me, but yeah, tunnel vision's bad. Don't do that.
Oh, Eddie, that is absolutely brilliant. And what a positive note to end on. Thank you so much for your time today. That's been absolutely brilliant to meet you. I'm going to stop recording now, but thanks again for giving your time.